In this video, you'll see how to find the least common multiple. So the least common multiple, that's the lowest number that two or more numbers will divide into. We're looking for the smallest multiple of two and sometimes three or four numbers. So let's see how we find that least common multiple. First, we're going to use the cake method that we did to find the greatest common divisor. So we're going to start off doing the same thing, set up our numbers in a cake, and do exactly the same thing that we did when we were looking for the greatest common divisor. And then we're going to keep dividing until we get ones at the top of our cake. And remember, if a number does not divide evenly into another, we just bring that number up to the next line, and you'll see some examples of that. If we're finding the LCM of three or more numbers, we're going to make sure that there are no common factors in any of those numbers. Otherwise, we'll find a common multiple, but not the least common one. And then the product of all the numbers we use to divide, that's going to be our LCM. So let's go through this example. I want to find the least common multiple of 20 and 35. So I'm going to do exactly what I did to find the greatest common divisor. See what goes into 20 and 35. A 5 goes into both of these. 5 will go into 20 4 times. It goes into 35 7 times. Is there anything in common with 4 and 7? No, only one. So 5 would be the greatest common divisor, right? But I'm not looking for the greatest common divisor. I'm looking for the least common multiple. So there's nothing that goes into 4 or 7. So I'm just going to divide by 4. And 4 divided by 4 is 1. And since 4 does not divide evenly into 7, I'm just going to bring that 7 up. And then finally, I want to divide by 7 because I'm looking to get ones at the top of my cake here. So 7 doesn't divide evenly into 1, so I'm just going to bring the 1 up, and 7 goes into 7 one time. So now that I've got the ones at the top of my cake, I can multiply everything that I used here as my divisors to get my least common multiple. So my least common multiple is the product of 5 and 4 and 7. So 5 times 4 is 20, and 20 times 7 is 140. So the least common multiple of 20 and 35 is 140. That's the smallest number that those two will divide into evenly. Alright, here's another example with 3 numbers now. So I'm going to start off the same way. What goes into 12 and 14 and 16? Well, they're all even, so I know 2 will. 2 will go into 12 6 times, into 14 7 times, and into 16 8 times. Now, is there anything that's a common factor with 6 and 7 and 8? No, there's not, so we found our GCD, which is 2. But now that I've got 3 numbers, I want to look and see, are there any common factors with 2 of these 3 numbers? And I see 6 and I see 8, and I think to myself, well, yeah, both of these are even, which means 2 can go into 6 3 times. 2 can go into 8 4 times. 2 does not go into 7, so I'm going to just bring the 7 up. Now, is there anything that goes into 3 or 4? No. Nothing goes into 3 and 7 except for 1, and nothing goes into 7 and 4 except for 1. So now I'm just going to divide these up until I get ones at the top of my cake. So 3 goes into 3 once, bring up the 7, bring up the 4, and then I'll divide by 7. 7 doesn't go into 1, so I'm bringing up the 1. 7 goes into 7 one time. Doesn't go into 4, so I'm bringing up the 4. And last, divide by 4. Bring up my 1s here, and 4 goes into 4 one time. So now I've got my candles at the top of my cake here. Alright, so now I'm going to multiply all of the numbers that I divided as my divisors here. So 2 times 2 times 3 times 7 times 4. Well, I know that 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 3 is 12. So this is 12 times 7 times 4. 12 times 7, that gives me 84. And 84 times 4, that gives me 336. So the smallest number that 12, 14, and 16 will divide into is 336. Alright, here are some problems for you to practice on your own. Alright, I want to find the GCD and LCM of 90 and 36. So I put 90 and 36 in my cake. And I think to myself, well, what goes into 90 and 36? I know 9 does, so I'm going to divide 90 by 9, and I get 10. 36 divided by 9 is 4. Then I think to myself, well, what goes into 10 and 4? I know 2 does. 2 goes into 10 5 times. 2 goes into 4 twice. Is there any number besides 1 that will divide evenly into 5 and 2? No, there's not, so my greatest common divisor is 18. 9 times 2 is how I got that. Next, I want to get 1s at the top of my cake here, so I'm going to divide out the numbers that are left here. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. Doesn't go into 2, so I bring the 2 up. And then I'm going to divide by 2 and bring up my 1. 2 goes into 2 one time. Now my LCM is going to be the product of these 4 numbers. So my LCM is 9 times 2, that's 18. 5 times 2 is 10. 18 times 10, 180. Alright, last example here. You got to find the GCD and LCM of 3 numbers. So my numbers are 16, 40, and 50. And I think to myself, well, what goes into all of these? I know 2 goes into all of these, so I'm going to divide by 2. 2 goes into 16 8 times, goes into 40 20 times, and it goes into 50 25 times. There's no number, except for 1, that will divide evenly into all 3 of these. So the greatest common divisor of 16, 40, and 50 is 2. Next, I want to keep dividing, and remember, when I have 3 numbers, I look, is there anything in common with 2 of these 3 numbers? And I just look at the 8 and the 20. I know they're both even, so I know 2 will divide into 8 4 times. 2 goes into 20 10 times. 2 does not go into 25, so I bring up my 25. And then I see that 2 will again go into 4 and 10, so I divide. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. Again, doesn't go into 25, so I bring the 25 up. Not done yet. I look at the 5 and the 25, and I see that 5 goes into both of these. So 5 doesn't go into 2, I'm bringing that up. 5 goes into 5 1 time. It goes into 25 5 times. I can divide by 2. 2 goes into 2 once, doesn't go into 1, so I bring up the 1, and I bring up the 5. And last one here, tall cake. Got to divide by 5. I'm going to bring up my 1s, and I'm going to divide 5 by 5 and get 1. So now I've got the candles at the top. I want to multiply all of these numbers together, and that's going to get me my LCM. So 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 2 is 10. And 2 times 2 is 4. 10 times 10 is 100. And 100 times 4 is 400. The least common multiple is 400. And that's how we find the least common multiple of numbers.